Hello everyone and welcome back to my channel. As you can see, in today's video I will be talking about hair and I will be focusing on the alHair shader. This high quality groom was sponsored by a colleague of mine and he was kind enough to give it to me so I can do some tutorials on realistic hair shading. You can check him out. He did worked on lots of bigger movies like Guardians and X-Men and Jungle Book, which are pretty nice and they have really good work from him. So he also in his show reel you can see what he did on the Jungle Book. He, for instance, did the groom on Shere Khan, Bagheera and Mowgli. So he knows his stuff, and I was really lucky to get this nice high quality groom so I can show you more or less a production shader I would do for grooming characters. So this groom was done in XGen, which needs a bit of work to get it to work with Arnold or especially with alHair. What else? To get the XGen dialog, you go to the modeling menu and then in generate, you find the XGen editor and then you get this on the right. In Maya 17, you have lots of options to customize your UI, so this might not look the same as on your machine. But most of the tabs I will be using are quite straightforward and you should be able to follow along. This will mainly be about shading, so I won't go into specifics on grooming. Yeah, so the only things I will be changing is, or it's a very important thing for the shader to work with, that XGen needs to export Curve IDs for the alHair shader to do proper variations in the first runs. And Curve ID is a unique identifier for each first strand. So to get this working, what you got to do is go to the XGen editor and in the preview output section, and then at the bottom, first you need to choose the Randomize Arnold. I think you do that in the output settings. Renderer type is Arnold. And then you have this custom shader parameters. So what you have to do is add curve underscore ID and make sure it's a float value and click the little plus sign. And then the value is $ID. What this does, it writes the XGen ID into the primvar into the primvar curve ID. And I need to do this for my other description as well, a small clumps description. And it takes a while because it's pretty high res in the viewport. So let's just add the same thing. Curve underscore ID plus, and the value is $ID. So this is the only thing you have to do for now to get the alHair shader working with XGen. Yeti, for instance, does this Curve ID export automatically. So now in my previous tutorial, I was talking about lights. So this is kind of a simple light setup, one rim from the left and then a filler from the right. And I've got an overall HDR light. So let's start up the renderer, Arnold, and then render view. And the new thing is you always have to click start with the red play button there. So currently there is just an Lambert shader assigned, or it should be, and then I will assign the alHair shader and we will start from scratch to finish, and I will show you some nice little tricks how to create like mutant hairs, which are like white hairs for older characters. You might want to do that, and I will explain lots of the values on the alHair shader. So progress. It takes a while to translate because there's lots of hair going on. And also what you need to know is that hair is really thin and you need high A samples to get a good clean looking render. So I will be mostly rendering smaller regions so it's easier for you guys to follow. So you can currently see there is no shader assigned. I've got some nice soft lighting on the left, which is the rim. So this is now a partially resolved image, and the first thing I want to do is I will select the two descriptions, right click on them in the viewport and assign favorite material and then alHair. Right. So this is the default shader parameters. It looks super strange, I agree. So let's just save this and go over. Right, so let's go to the hypershade, and I want to dock the render view on the right side, so it's all in one view. And this is now the docked version. I don't need the outliner anymore. So let's just do this. This is the hair shader. Let's call this alHair training. All right, so right hand side is the render. In the middle is my attribute for this shader, and then on the right you can see the result. So let's talk about the first setting in the shader, which is called melanin. And melanin is a fancy word for hair color, and it is more or less the pigmentation of the hair. So you can see when you hover over, you can see that the values for white hair, for blonde hair, are between 0.2 and 0.4, and the bigger the value gets going to 1, the darker the hair color. So let's just slide the value. So the more I go to the right, more I go to 1, the darker the hair gets. And also everything goes hand in hand. The transmission, the glints, the little dandruff glints or whatever, everything is based on this melanin value. So if you don't want to use that, you can still just disable this, go put it to 0 so you get white hair, and then you can actually drive your hair with the dye color, which is just a color tint. So I can now add, for instance, a yellow color, and this would kind of be going to the hairdresser and dyeing your hair with this color. And in the real world, you still have the pigmentation, so you always will have a melanin value in your hair. For blonde hair, it's 0.2, and then you go to the hairdresser and you dye your hair over on top of that. So this is how it would physically behave. The highlight width is how soft or wet your hair is. So the smaller the value, the more shiny it is, and the bigger the value, the more dirty or dusty and rough the hair gets. So let's just put the dye color back to be white. And now you think, how would I do root and tip colors? In the AI hair shader, you have root and tip values, parameters to change the colors to. In the alHair, you would use a ramp to drive that. So importantly, what you need to do is in the Advanced tab, make sure that you have uparam chord and vparam chord entered here. This is for the shader to know the length of the UV per hair strand. So the first thing I want to do is create a ramp, a texture ramp, like so. And I want to plug this. You can either plug it into the melanin or diffuse color, dye color. So for now, I just plug it into the dye color. Let's see. And now let's just make the preset to be rainbow. And let's see what we get. So the root is here at the top, and you can see the root color is red, which is the left. And then the further down we go, the hair strand, we go to blue. So this is exactly what we want to have. And if I show you the whole image, and maybe for this tutorial, I'll just change my resolution to be 25 just for now, so we get a bit faster iterations. So let's just change the color to be a like kind of a blonde color, something like this, more brown. This will now be the root color, and then the tip color is from the same hue, but a more brighter value. So this is now and if you now move the pointers, the positions, and you can actually change the color along the tangent. Let's just see how it resolves. Right, as you can see, it's now darker at the top and then going lighter to the bottom. Before we go into the melanin values, I want to first disable all the other fancy speculars and transmissions. So I will go through it step by step to show you exactly what each thing does. And I will just be focusing on the right side. So if I go back to the ramp and make the right hand brighter still, you can see it better what's going on. So now you can see it's dark, and then it's brightening up going to the bottom. So what are all these values? So going back to this, let's talk about diffuse. Diffuse is actually just the diffuse lighting which the fur produces. So if this would be 0 as well, everything will be just black. These two modes this is a more simple way for doing hair. It's better for shorter hair, so you get it's a bit faster also to compute, but the dual scattering is more realistic. So you can hover over each of these values and you get a in-depth, or not in-depth, but you get a short description what the parameter does. But in most cases, the default values are pretty solid and good, except for the glint strength, which I find is way too strong. But anyway, so let's work with melanin colors. So dye color back to white, and let's just use a value of 0.4 and diffuse to 1. So this is now the raw diffuse color, and if you want to see the AUV for that, this is what it looks like. And before we start going to specular, I want to show you something else, which is called randomize. And this is the thing why we had to go to XGen and add this Curve ID parameter. I'm first quickly changing the bucket size to be 16. Smaller buckets means faster updates or faster bucket renderings. Okay, so in this randomize tab, you can randomize the melanin amount, the dye hues, and the dye saturation. What it means, it gives a random color per strand. And if we wouldn't have entered this Curve ID in the XGen thingy, in here we wouldn't get this. Then it would look just like a solid color, like this. This is when it's not working. So the bigger this number, the bigger the variation from strand to strand, and you can see what's happening. And this isn't no way too strong, but you can actually see the realism it adds to your fur or hair. So default value 0.08 is pretty good. You can see that, yeah, you can read what's on the tooltip. So let's just stick with 0.1. Might be a bit strong, but just for the tutorial, I think it's good enough. Right, so let's also work with a ramp again. And this time I will plug the ramp out color R into the melanin. So we want an average hair color of 0.4. So let's just connect this. And this is now only driven by the ramp. And I want to change the ramp values to be black and white. And then the root color needs to be darker. So in this case, it needs to be a more whiter color. So let's just add a value of maybe 0.6 for the root color and a tip color of 0.35. Let's just see what we get. Right, so the roots, how do they look? This is now my root color. It's a bit darker. And then going down the hair strands, we get brighter. This already gives us a natural feeling. This is the first thing we want to do. So going to the next part in the shader is specular. And specular is the shininess of the fur. I always tend to say fur or whatever, hair. So let's increase the value to 1 and you can see it gets brighter and you see nice reflections on it. We always need to wait for the bucket to finish until you see everything. Right, so this is now with specular 1 enabled. And if you think this is too rough, you can change the highlight width to say that's something to put it to 1.5 to get more shiny hair. And the highlight shift is always 1.5, more or less 1.5 times of the highlight width. So to do that, it will be 175, or maybe you can just add 2. This is for the shift to the second specular lobe. So this is now way more shiny here, like freshly shampooed, I guess. Right, if you think the hair is still too dark, we can easily just change the ramp and make this darker to get it brighter. It's a bit controversy, but this is how it is. 0.4, and this, let's go darker still to brighten them up a bit, something like this. Right, so going back to the next one, this is just a second specular lobe, and I think we can check the AOVs. So this is the first specular, looking like this, and currently I don't have a second one. So let's enable the second specular again. And this is more a color tinted reflection, and it helps to give more shininess on front facing hair. Most of the time it is a bit too strong, as you can see. It's now really bright. Let's resolve this image and we can see what we get with the default values of 1. Right, no need to continue the render. You can see already it's way too bright and it's too shiny. It's almost like sprayed with spray paint, gold spray paint or something. So that's what I always do. I reduce the glint to 1, and I like to also reduce the strength to 0.8 or 0.5 maybe. Let's just see how that looks. And going back to progressive mode, we can see that it got darker now. Even the specular one might be still a bit too strong, too shiny. Let's just see how this resolves. Right, you can see now it's looking way better and more natural. And the next thing is the transmission. Transmission is kind of backlight. So whenever there's a light coming from the back of the fur, you see some highlight around it, like a little of a kind of a halo. So let's just go to, first let's see the specular 2-lobe, specular 2-lobe, specular 1-lobe, and they get added together. So you get a brighter hair. And so let's go to transmission. And for you to show the transmission, I like just to disable quickly all the others. Let's just put them all to black. It would be the same as setting the values to 0. And enabling transmission. You can see it's mostly on the edges. You can see some brighter fur. And this is exactly what it does. It's the bleeding around the edges of the hair. So if there's thin hair or single hair strands, they get brighter because they're thinner and they catch more light. It is a natural thing, so I like to keep it on. You can increase the strength if you want, but it's mostly, the defaults are pretty good. So let's just enable everything to be fully white. Like so. And the next thing I want to talk about is a minimum pixel value. And what that does, it just says or defines how thick the minimum hair width is, and it helps you get cleaner render results, and it does not really make it look better, but it is faster and you have a little compromise in quality. So to change the minimum pixel width of a strand, you go to the descriptions and select them, and in the attribute editor on the shape you see you have the option of minimum pixel, where is it? Can't find it. Pixel here, minimum pixel width. On default it's 0, which means there is whatever it comes from the procedural is being rendered. So a value of 1 means that the thinnest hair is a value, a thickness of 1. So you might change these values to be a bit bigger to get cleaner or more thicker strands, and you don't need as many AA samples to get a resolved image. So let's just change them to 0.2 for both descriptions. Let's see the render. Right, so by changing the minimum pixel value, we also made the fur thicker and we got a bit brighter hair. So this is what it looks with a minimum pixel value of 0.1. And you can see it's now really blonde, so we can change the ramp a bit to make the hair a bit darker again. Right, as you can see what we get, we see a bit more detail in the hair. I'm currently just on 400 by 500 pixels, and I zoomed in almost 200%, and this is what we get. So let's just change the ramp just to make it a bit darker again. So darker means brighter values. So this is the tip we're changing, and let's make them also a bit brighter to overall make it darker. Right. So the next thing I want to show you is a neat little trick. For instance, if you've got like older CG characters and it has a few white hairs or gray hairs, how would you do this? You can definitely paint them in a map, but you will always get you will never get just one hair strand because there are so many, and you can't you don't have the resolution and texture to really pick one first strand. So how would you do this? Pretty simple, or not simple, but a nice way of doing this is creating a few nodes. And the first one we will create is an AI user data float, which is an Arnold Primva node, and the float error value is Curve ID the same, which Xgen exports, and we will be using the Curve ID, which is a unique ID per each hair. We will use that, and this one will connect to the AL jitter color node, which is a randomization node. So it needs an input signal for current the new our signal will be Curve ID, and then you have options to vary the input signal. Currently, it's a random grayscale value, and we want to remap this a bit. So the input color we will get is white, and then you can do saturations. For instance, let's say you would have a color like blue, and you can actually do some saturation values, but for the gray hairs we just keep it on white, and saturation is also no color. The only thing we change is the max and min is 1, so the maximum color is white and the minimum is black. We don't want to hue shift, and this is the default settings. So, and then you create an AL switch color node. I know it's a bit of many nodes. Most of them are pretty new to you guys. This is also a bit more advanced stuff. This will just add a bit more realism to your images. So the input now for my base texture will be this ramp, which is these melanin values. So the out color of this, which is a grayscale map, goes into my input A, out color, I'm blind, default color, not sure if that's the same. Anyways, I'll just drop it into middle mouse drop into input 0. And then for the gray hairs, I want a value of black. Yeah, because black is white. Doesn't make sense, but it is for the alHair shader. And let's just the other ones. I don't want to be confused by all this fancy colors, so it's all just black. So the mix value is my signal, which comes from the Curve ID, which comes from the jitter color. So the out color R connects to the mix. This will just say which strands to color, and then you have the threshold. And if this value is on 1, it will be only taking input 1. And if it's on 0, it will be only taking input 0. So this is a probability or a threshold. So if you have a high value, let's say this is the percentage, like 50% is now input 0 and 50% is input 1. And the higher this value, the more it goes to the other one, to the next one. So if I have a value of 999, it will more or less mean 10% of the fur get this color. So let's see if it actually holds up what I just said, and let's connect the out color R into the melanin. And let's retranslate, just say first, and update. So something went wrong, I guess. So let's just check the diffuse color and change my resolution to be 100. And now we will zoom into a region just to see exactly what's going on. So what is happening? We can see that most of them are white and only a few are brown, or this color. So it might be that my threshold is not being set properly. So let's go higher values, let's say 0.9. And you can see now it works way better. So most of them are now brown and a few are gray. This is still pretty gray for a character, but it's definitely getting there. You can see that this one is white, and you see what's happening. Definitely too strong. So let's increase the threshold. Let's go to 9. And now we actually see what's happening here. You can see that only a few hairs now get white. And this is exactly what we want, because that's what happens in real life. Obviously, if you want to control it better, you would paint a map. Like it's called, in technical terms, it's a probability map, which you paint wherever you want to have a different texture. You can also have plugged in a completely different texture map to drive these values. So I think currently it's still a bit too much. So let's just go a bit higher to 9.5. And now we really get only, I don't, I'm not sure. It's maybe 5% of all the hair are now white. I think that's what it is. And it might be that you will not really see this in the render, but if you have close-up shots, it just helps to deliver. The other thing, which is a neat little trick, is you can randomize the tangent, which gives you a reflection randomization, which just, you don't need to, this is like a fake scraggle for the groom. So what this does is you can actually randomize the direction of the tangent, and this gives you a more like not super clean, fresh hair. It's more like used or dirty hair. So I will render this now, and I will present you this render so you can actually see what it does look like. My machine is not the best. It's good, but it's not the best. So I will render this offline, and I will show it to you when it's done, and I will show it in a second. I just want to rotate around the geo just for you to see how it behaves in different light angles. I know it's hard to see because it's not really resolving. Yeah, anyways, I will render a few angles maybe, and then you can see what it looks like. So see you soon, thank you, and I will be back when it's done. Right, so I'm still rendering, but this one is from the backside angle. And I think maybe the gray hairs are a bit too much, but overall you can see it looks quite cool. It is shot, or the HDR I'm using is a studio environment, so it will be overall pretty natural lit. I don't have direct sunlight, so you won't see perfectly nice, sharp highlights. That's why it's a bit reflective overall, but that's just because of the studio light. And the other angle is this one, which is more or less the front-facing one. And you can see the transmission is working pretty nice on the edges here, so you get some nice color bleeding. Yeah, the gray hairs are, I guess, too white, so a white value is just too strong. So maybe just shift it a bit to the melding of 0.1 or something, not perfectly white, and then it should be fine. Other than that, I think the groom works really nice. You can see all the curls and all the clumping is working really good. And you can see the shift on the hair strands, and the width works also pretty good. Maybe the hair is a bit too light. It could be a bit darker. But with this tutorial, I just wanted to show you the basic, or not basic, but the workflows I would be going through in production, like doing melanin randomizations, adding color maps, root and tip colors. Obviously, if you have a texture artist, or if you want to paint your textures yourself, or Mari, you would paint a root and a tip color, and based on that, maybe a probability map to swap between the maps. If you have variation maps or something like that, you can use a switch color to import different tip maps, for instance, and use a probability map to just paint areas where you want that map to be present, and other areas where the other map should be present. So I hope this did help you setting up here. It was a requested tutorial for quite a long time now. Eventually, I will also do an AI here, which ships this shader, which ships with Arnold. I just like to use the AL shaders because they have a bit more flexibility and a bit more production ready because of the nice options you have in them. So thank you guys for watching, and if you did like the video, please support me by giving me a thumbs up, leaving some comments below. It just helps me to keep encouraged and motivated to create new content for you guys. Thanks again for watching. See you soon. Bye.